you and I were talking this morning, and we sort of didn't hit a very, very big story in the world of geopolitics, namely the what Russian bloggers are calling the Russian Pearl Harbor. And of course, we're talking about the drone strike carried out by Ukrainian forces. They smuggled drones into the interior of Russia in what amounts to a major escalation of that conflict, right as peace talks are ongoing in Istanbul. Trump has sort of thrown up his hands at both the Ukrainians and the Russians. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, for the world and for the prospects of World War III, ending a war is extraordinarily difficult. And especially when you get dug in, when either side thinks that they're either being forced or asked to concede too much or concede too little, especially if you're Russia and you think you're winning this war, and Ukraine looking to make a punch Russia right in the eye, right in the face, to say, hey, we still have cards to play, echoing back to Trump's famous statements within the Oval Office with Vladimir Zelensky and JD Vance. So, Blake, the details of this strike are striking. It almost reads like a movie. Why don't you walk us through how Ukraine was able to execute what they're calling Operation Spider's Web deep into the heart of Russia?
Yeah, Andrew, it is genuinely it's a lot like a movie. It's also a lot like a video game. That's pretty funny because I heard comparisons to one I've actually played before. It's called Ace Combat. But so it was done with drones, unmanned drones, several hundred of them, I believe. I think they said it. Going off memory, I think it was about 118 drones or so. But what they did is they weren't flown in just from Ukraine. They were smuggled into Russia. And at least what they're publicly claiming they did is they were packaged in cargo containers that were designed to look like they were carrying prefabricated housing. And the reason they did this is since it was prefabricated housing, they had a good excuse for why do these cargo containers have solar panels on top of them? Well, they weren't for the roofs of housing. They were to keep the drones charged. They actually were just using them to keep the drones powered up as long as they needed them, and then they could launch them whenever they were in place and ready. Reportedly, they were planning this operation for 18 months before they launched it. And so they got these containers into Russia. They got them outside of these different bases they want to attack. And to give you a sense of the scale here, one of the bases they attacked was just outside Murmansk, Russia. If you look that up on a map, it's in the Arctic Circle. It's in the far northwest of Russia, close to Finland. And on the other end of Russia, another place they hit was in Amur province. That's way out in far eastern Russia. It's close to China. It's close to Japan. They hit a base there. They also hit a base at Irkutsk. That is in central Siberia near Mongolia. And they hit two air bases closer to Moscow. So they really hit every single part of Russia with this attack. They claim they took out several dozen of these heavy bombers that Russia has. These bombers, they can be used for delivering nuclear weapons, but the reason they wanted to hit them was they're also used for delivering cruise missiles, other heavy ordnance. And so they took them out. They're claiming they took out about $7 billion worth of Russian airplanes, which is quite a few. And as we've learned with these drones, they can be made incredibly cheaply by comparison.
Well, it was interesting too because this was part of a fairly secretive operation to fund the drones by Jake Sullivan during the Biden administration. U.S. taxpayers poured $1.5 billion into developing these drones that were probably used to coordinate and execute this attack. So American fingerprints are very much all over this.
We're honored to be partnering with the Alan Jackson Ministries, and today I want to point you to their podcast. It's called Culture and Christianity, the Alan Jackson Podcast. What makes it unique is Pastor Alan's biblical perspective. He takes the truth from the Bible and applies it to issues that we're facing today: gender confusion, abortion, immigration, Doge, Trump, and the White House, issues in the church. He doesn't just discuss the problems. In every episode, he gives practical things we can do to make a difference. His guests have incredible expertise and powerful testimonies. Each episode will make you recognize the power of your faith and how God can use your life to impact our world today. The Culture and Christianity podcast is informative and encouraging. You could find it on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Alan Jackson Ministries is working hard to bring biblical truth back into our culture. You can find the Culture and Christianity podcast, sermons, and other thought-provoking teachings on our Pastor Alan's YouTube channel at Alan Jackson Ministries.
So it's 117 drones. We're talking about to the Arctic Circle, near Japan, closer to the border, around Moscow, right in north of Mongolia and Siberia. I mean, this was a very widespread attack. Vladimir Zelensky is saying that this was a brilliant execution. And again, the peace negotiations are ongoing in Istanbul. So turning our attention to that, Blake, I mean, so it's fair to say Russia got hit pretty hard, but this doesn't fundamentally change their nuclear capability. It maybe stretches their capacity somewhat, right? That they now have maybe a third less of these heavy bombers that can deliver nuclear blows. We're not hopefully getting to that point. That's the big question. Are we escalating towards a potential World War III? That's been the risk with this conflict from the beginning. There's some news reports that are saying Vladimir Putin is being urged to consider nuclear weapons. But even if he doesn't go that far, Blake, maybe paint a picture for the audience of just how robust the Russian capacity is to execute this war. I mean, a ballistic missile, I've seen video footage of that in eastern Ukraine where they drop these. Those are devastating in and of themselves. Does this change Russian calculus of what they're able to do inside Ukraine?
Well, it gets into, the big picture, which is, we've heard people who've been saying, the war is 3 months from ending for, 3 years now. And I think this is mostly a signal that, hey, like, Ukraine can still make things hurt a lot. They can cause a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of ways this can damage them. And so in a sense, you could say that's actually a play for peace in that you can show Ukraine is capable of hurting Russia a good amount. And I think a barrier to serious escalation that is helpful is Trump is so clearly in favor of getting a peace deal. With Biden, we had Biden saying Putin has to go. He's using this regime change rhetoric. He was showing no interest in negotiation. Trump clearly wants to negotiate. He's clearly pressured Ukraine to make some concessions. And it seems, based on his anger, that it's Russia that is less interested in peace than Ukraine, which can make sense. They have more reserves overall. But I think that's a helpful barrier to this escalating too far. I mean, if Putin actually used nuclear weapons, I think that would very quickly turn almost the entire world against him because it would be so extreme and frankly so unjustified. So we have to hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, Trump is, according to his Truth Social, very upset that this operation was carried out into the Russian interior while negotiations were ongoing. And the White House is saying that they were not informed before this attack took place. Hard to know if that is, brinksmanship or, sort of the PR role of this. I'm going to take their word for it that they didn't know beforehand. All of this complicates a very high wire act peace negotiation that's going in Istanbul right now.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. And another angle that is very important to emphasize here is this clearly is something we should worry about too. It's a good point towards the need to secure the border and also just understand how much the nature of warfare has changed. America, we have tons of shipping containers coming into this country all of the time, and any country can afford drones like this. That's what's really crazy is North Korea, Iran, really poor countries could be developing these drones and ship them in quietly in a container and use them to hit things in the United States. And we'll probably be seeing this in the future someday, and we need to start talking right now about being ready for that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, you kind of remind me of the terror attack that happened in Boulder, Colorado. Tom Homan's warning that it's just a matter of time until we get more of that in the interior of the United States. So, Blake, you were talking about the soft targets, vulnerabilities that we have to contend with here. This drone technology is really going to change the way that warfare is executed in many different theaters across the world. But definitely here in the United States, kind of makes me think of Golden Dome, kind of makes me think of hardening our own southern border, but there's that northern border, which is huge. People don't talk about it or think about it as much, but it is a vulnerability. Um, Reflect on what happened in Boulder, Colorado, and dive deeper into what you're thinking there, Blake.
Well, so there's Boulder, Colorado, of course, where you just have a guy who came across the border and shouldn't have been in this country. And he was just a lunatic, thankfully, went nuts, tried to kill people by setting them on fire. Thankfully, he was nuts and inept, so nobody died currently. But it's trivially easy to imagine far more effective people coming in who likely have already come in. We had this effectively open border with Earth for 4 years under Joe Biden. It wasn't just people coming from Mexico. It wasn't just people from Venezuela or Haiti. We had literally tens of thousands of people who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border who came from China and got in. And you hear wild stories like Chinese gangsters basically took over the illegal marijuana growing business in Maine, things like that. Another story I always find myself thinking of, you can Google this, in Fresno, California, the Chinese managed to build an entire illegal secret biolab in like a warehouse in Fresno. And we don't really know what the purpose of it was, but someone built an illegal entire biolab that we only found, months or years later. So if you're able to sneak that kind of thing in and pull it off, you can sneak in and pull off just about anything. And what we see overall is there's been a change in the nature of warfare. You think 100 years ago in World War II, what mattered was what's your overall industrial output? Can you make thousands and thousands of very simple tanks and planes and guns and artillery and all of that? Then, in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, what mattered was this extremely precise, advanced, extremely expensive technology. And that was great for America. We could build these bombers that, stealth bombers that could drop these extremely high-tech bombs that we could pilot into a specific spot, and you could just blow anyone to smithereens, and we could beat, any country in a war with almost no casualties. Now what we see, though, is this rise of the power of, call it irregular warfare, that we can build a robot that, for a few $1,000, you can build a robot that you can stick a bomb on, stick a gun on, and it can fly basically anywhere. Or go look at what Boston Dynamics is building. You'll be able to build a little robot dog-looking thing. And again, put a bomb on it, put a gun on it, and you can hide it anywhere, and it can attack anywhere, and nobody's life is at risk. Suicide attacks have always been possible, and the biggest barrier to them, frankly, is there's a limit on how many people are literally willing to kill themselves to fight for a cause. But now you're getting rid of that limitation. You can do fully autonomous attacks with robots, with drones, and suddenly suicide-style attacks can happen anywhere without having to sacrifice anybody. And really, the reason we don't see them in the United States is, thankfully, we haven't been in a big war with a serious adversary in a while. And thankfully, under President Trump, we seem committed to not getting into one of those wars. But I fear that if it were to happen, even against a marginal country like Iran, you could very quickly realize there are a lot of vulnerabilities in the United States that are shockingly easy to hit.